The red dawn had barely brushed the walls of Ashai when Melisandre first felt the tremor in the flames. In her tower of black stone and obsidian glass, she knelt before a brazier's triple tongues, embers that danced like living spirits, whispering secrets she alone could hear. Outside, the shadowed city lay silent under its eternal haze of soot and salt, but within her chamber, the fire buzzed with portent. She leaned closer, fingertips brushing the ironwork rim, feeling warmth seep through her silk robes. The flames swirled into visions, crimson waves cresting over jagged spires, smoke like writhing serpents choking an ancient realm. She saw the Dragon Lord's halls collapse, their golden tiles bursting into molten rain. She smelled brimstone and ash. The flames pulsed. Valyria was dying, but this was no ordinary vision. Valyria was distant, untouched by Aralor's design. Until now. The Red Priests had always spoken of the Lord of Light's grand tapestry, birth and death, fire and rebirth. Melisandre herself had long believed her power flowed only from that single source. Yet here, before dawn, the fire told a different tale, of doom wrought by dragonfire, not the Lord. The prophecy was hers, alone. She rose, robes whispering in the hush. Around her neck, the ruby at her breast, warm as a living heart, pulsed in time with the flames. Every bead held a spark of power, gifts from Aralor. Yet in this moment she wondered if the god she served had fractured, his will splintered into countless flickers across the world. Beyond those walls, Valyria's doom would unfold within months. She could taste it in her blood, the acrid sting of defeat. But how to warn a realm drunk on hubris, its dragonlords lost to their own magic? Melisandre closed her eyes and remembered her first journey out of Ashai. Centuries ago when she was but a young acolyte, hawthorn green eyes wide with wonder. She had traveled north along silk veins, where dormant dragons slumbered beneath obsidian peaks, and she had glimpsed patterns in the ebb and flow of flame. The Red Priests taught that every flame was a doorway, if one learned to listen. In the years since, her faith in R'hllor had deepened, tempered by doubt and sacrifice. She had watched kings fall, kingdoms rise, and all the while, carried secrets no other could bear. Yet never had she felt such dread as now, when the world's pivot trembled under distant thunder. Down the winding steps, past rows of driftwood skulls, a grim collection of victims who had angered the Lord of Light, she descended to the Hall of Whispers. Here the walls were lined with alcoves, each housing a single lantern. They burned with ghost-white flame, fed by oil of ashvine and the tears of acolytes. Each lantern represented a prayer, a plea for guidance. She paused before one whose flame danced erratically, a foretelling of turmoil, and she barely dared open her mouth. The doom of Valyria, she whispered, voice steady, though her heart thundered. It comes not from Aralor's hand, but from dragonfire turned against its master. Silence followed, broken only by the hiss of flame. At her side the priest Inigos knelt, eyes downcast. My lady, the lords of Valyria would never heed a priestess of Ashai. Then we must bring them to heel, she replied. We must show them the flames as I have seen. He bowed. Who among us can stand before the dragon lords? They laugh at our rituals. Melisandre's eyes glowed. Let them laugh until they feel the heat on their backsides. Far across the sea, in the jeweled spires of Valyria, the dawn broke in a riot of gilded light. Dragon smoke curled above harbors, where triremes floated like dark reflections on Mercury. The pale towers shimmered, crowned with dragon bone. Gardens bloomed with crimson flourashes, whose petals cracked like embers underfoot. In the House of the Golden Flame, high in the citadel, Lord Aenar Targaryen held court. His silver hair fell over scarred shoulders, and his violet eyes glittered like amethysts. 3 dragons circled overhead, Vogr, Vormithor, Pyrath, and their roars echoed like living thunder. Aenar tapped his staff of horn and bronze. We welcome all who bring gifts to Valyria, he intoned, voice deep as cavern stone. Who stands before me? From the open doors strode a delegation of red priests, dozens of them, their flame-red robes trailing like rivers of fire. At their head walked Inigos, his face pale, features drawn. The others carried strange braziers, each shaped like the head of a dragon, silver, black, and copper. Einar's lips curved into a mocking smile. He raised one hand. "The Lord of Light, tell me, priests, what brings you to Valyria? That you come bearing ravens would be less curious." Inigo bowed. "Great Lord, we come bearing warnings from the Lord of Light." Einar laughed. The sound reverberated off marble. "Warnings? Of what?" "The last wizards came with false prophecy and were fed to my dragons." A horn sounded. Chilling. 4 silk-robed figures entered. Dragon lords in exile, their family sigils stitched in jet and gold. They bowed stiffly. Behind them, a contingent of Unsullied, their spears gleaming. The court fell silent. Einar's gaze flicked. "Stand aside," he commanded the dragon lords. They obeyed, but with narrowed eyes. Inigo's pressed on. "My lord, with your leave, my mistress, Melisandre of Ashai, has seen visions in the sacred flame. A doom unlike any other. She bids me bring this fire to you." "Ashai," Einar repeated, eyebrows arched. "Home to your demon worshippers. We know your kind." "Then Derol." "This is not demonry," Inigo said with sudden fervor. "It is the clearest truth. Valyria's end is nigh." Einar's laughter cut him short. Flames licked his staff. "Then let us see your truth." At a gesture from Inigo's, the priests raised their dragon braziers. The silver one hissed, spitting sparks. The black radiated cold, smoke like ancient death. The copper roared, bellows filled with tongues of flame. The assembly recoiled as heat rippled outwards. The dragons overhead lowered, nostrils flaring. One, Vogr, circled lower, head cocked, its purple eyes fixed on the priests. "By these harbingers," Inigos declared, voice shaking, "I summon Melisandre." From the back of the hall, a hush fell. No sound but the priest's breathing and distant thunder. Then the doors part, and Melisandre appears. Tall, slender, draped in scarlet. Her hair gleams like spun copper, and her eyes burn with an inner flame. She walks without fear through the seated lords, her ruby pendant glowing. Einar stood. His dragons roared. The bells of the citadel chimed. Yet she moved as one shielded by faith, unbowed by mortal power. "Speak," he said. Melisandre paused before the dais. The heat from the braziers licked across her face. She breathed deeply. "My lord," she began, voice low as a river of smoke. "The doom that I have seen is not born of the Lord of Light, but of the old magic that sleeps in dragonfire. Valyria's power comes from the meld of dragon and man. But it is a cruel bargain. The flames that feed your dragons will rise and consume you." Einar's lips narrowed. "And what would you have? That we cease riding dragons? That we forsake our birthright?" She lifted her chin. "No, Dot. But I ask that you heed the warning. Spare the lives of your people. The doom comes on a tide of ash. Cities will fall. Dragon bones will shatter. The skies will burn hotter than any hearth." Nender. He stepped down, staff in hand. "Proof." Melisandre smiled as if she had expected this. "Proof I have." She raised her hand, and a spark leapt from the ruby at her throat, igniting the air above to form a sphere of living flame. Within it, the doom she had seen. The crumbling towers, the flood of magma, the sky turned ashen. The visions played like shreds of memory, twisting into monstrous shape. The hall gasped. Servants stumbled back, faces drained of blood. Even the Unsullied fell silent. Einar's dragons circled the sphere, claws clicking on stone. Vogr's roar shattered the vision, scattering flame like caged birds. The image flickered and returned. Melisandre spoke, voice hushed. "This is what I saw. This is what will come if you do not change course." The vision faded, the sphere dissipating into smoke. Einar stood for a heartbeat, silent as the grave. Then he nodded. "You have shown me the flame's truth. For that I owe you debt." He turned to the gathered lords. "This doom may yet be diverted." A murmur ran through the assembly. Dragon lords and exiles alike watched, eyes bright with wonder and fear. Melisandre inclined her head. "Our Lord grants all sight, but he also demands offering. You have seen what you hold most dear will burn. Now offer something in return." Einar folded his robes. "What does the priestess ask?" She lifted her eyes, colored like newborn fire. "That you bind your kingdoms to a pledge. That Valyria's power be tempered by mercy. That when trouble comes, and come it will, you remember, these flames were not your own making." "Then Duan Chao." He considered, hand on staff. "And if I refuse?" She smiled, and it was cold as spilled blood. "Then you will see the doom, and none will save you." Silence again, the weight of prophecy heavy upon the hall. Finally, Einar spoke. "We accept your pledge. Let Valyria stand in the fire of mercy as well as conquest." A cheer rose, a tremulous sound, but for the first time not born of hubris. Melisandre felt it as a tremor through the world, the first step toward a different fate. In the weeks that followed, Valyria shifted. Councils met, pledges were made. Temple fires burned alongside court lamps. The red priests were welcomed, their towers rising next to dragon roosts. Scholars debated prophecy. Smiths forged chains from Valyrian steel, marking truth and mercy. Dragons roared in celebration, until the day the first tremor struck. Beneath the smoking sea, the earth shuddered. Mages felt a pulse of magic warp bedrock. Farther north, in the vast jungles, volcanoes groaned. Smoke billowed above the pillars of Keys. Valyria's seers raced to the citadel, eyes wide, robes aflame with fear. Einar convened all beneath the golden flame. The great doors sealed. Dragons circled overhead, sensing doom. Melisandre stood beside him. The fire in her hands pulsed. She spoke. "The doom moves. We have delayed its arrival, but not its power. Now we must face the tempest." The red priests formed rings of flame lotus around the city. At each cardinal point, they lit great pyres, flaring like beacons in the gathering dusk. The lords brought gifts: gold, steel, incense. Merchants laid out spices from Yiti. Warriors brandished spears of sharkbone. Mummers danced in scarlet masks. At midnight, they began the ritual of the two fires. One to placate the old magic in the earth's belly, the other to honor the Lord of Light above. Drums thundered as priests chanted, invoking every name of fire: Dracares, Syrax, Relor. Melisandre's voice rose above the roar, a clarion call that made the very stones tremble. Outside, the world responded. Mountain slopes cracked, sending rivers of lava cascading. In the skies, lightning danced across the smoking sea. Yet, the ritual held. Flames from the pyres shot into the heavens, weaving a canopy of light that shielded the city. If only for a moment. When the dawn came, Valyria stood. Towers unbroken, streets unscathed, dragons soaring free. The people cheered, but Melisandre's eyes were distant. She had glimpsed the edge of the abyss, and knew the tide would return stronger. Miracle. They whispered. She shook her head. Not miracle. Bargain. And a dangerous one. Einar joined her on the battlements. His hair was singed, his robes stained with ash. He looked at her, gratitude and doubt warring in his eyes. "You saved us." "Only from the first wave," she replied. "The doom is patient." He clenched his staff. "Then we shall be patient too. We will learn the deeper magics, bind our dragons to mercy, temper our fire with wisdom. We will not be devoured." Melisandre turned to watch the dawn's first rays strike the citadel's golden spire. "Then we will write a new prophecy," she said softly. "One not of doom, but of hope." And in that silent moment, as amber light spilled over Valyria's gleaming streets, she believed it possible. A prophecy reshaped by will, by sacrifice, by the stubborn flame of life that, or lore true or fractured, had lit within her heart. Thus began the long reckoning of Valyria, where dragon lords and red priests walked hand in hand, forging alliances of fire and mercy. And in the years to come, when historians spoke of the doom that should have been, they would tell of Melisandre, the priestess who saw the end and dared to change its course. The tension in Valyria's streets never truly vanished. It merely changed character, shifting from arrogant certainty to a wary vigilance. Markets buzzed with guarded laughter, as merchants from distant lands whispered of trembling earth and the strange glow of the red priests' pyres. Dragons circled above, their great wings fanning currents of heated air across the black stone boulevards. In every high tower and every low alley, the question hung: when would the doom return? Melisandre felt it most keenly in the quiet hours before dawn, when Ashai's consort moon had not yet slipped behind the walls and the fires in her tower's hearths burned low. She would stand at a narrow window of swirling black glass, gaze drawn eastward, where the smoking sea churned like a great wound in the earth. There she saw the flicker of molten veins, the sickly glow of underworld fires, and she knew the old magic stirred. She could have warned Lord Aenar again, descended once more into the golden flame and pleaded for more time. Yet, she also understood that fear, if left unchecked, could poison the heart of even the most resolute people. Better that Valyria's inhabitants felt steadier faith in their own resilience, even if that confidence was a fragile veneer. For prophecies are not merely foretold. They are lived, shaped by choices at every turning. On the third night, after the ritual of the two fires, Melisandre's reflection emerged from the polished glass like a ghost. Her hair, still red gold with the residue of flame lotus pollen, hung loose around her shoulders. Under her robes, the ruby at her throat lay heavy, its warmth pulsing with her heartbeat. She inhaled the scent of incense, a blend of silver smoke and ash vine, and closed her eyes. When she opened them, the flames in the brazier before her flared to life, casting her shadow tall against the ebony wall. Strange shapes danced in the fire, dragons coiling round towers, hands reaching from below. But beneath these visions lay something new, a rhythm older than Ashai itself, a whisper of voices, chanting in a tongue she knew but could not name. They spoke of balance, of debts owed and repaid, of fire borrowed and returned. Her lips moved as though in silent prayer. "Erlor," she murmured, though whether to the god or to the vision she could not say. "Guide me to what must be done." The voices swelled, harmonizing into a single note of pure flame. Melisandre felt the world tilt, sensed a deeper current beneath the surface of her own power, and then, as suddenly as it had come, the vision vanished. In its place lay calm, a promise that if the world's fire was to be redirected, it must be through the deepest sacrifice. At dawn she left Ashai behind, traveling by swift galley across the smoking sea. The journey was nothing like the pilgrimages she had made when she was young. Those had been voyages of wonder, of first vows and first doubts. This was something else entirely, a hurry tinged with dread, driven by knowledge of a calamity that none but she truly understood. On the ship's deck, she met with 3 other red priestesses, handpicked for their mastery of both flame lore and the old magic. They were the sisters Kaina, Chayana, and Nizri, each bearing scars of ash and witchcraft tattoos of living ink that shifted under skin. They greeted Melisandre with solemn bows, and she felt both their solidarity and their wariness. Not all among them, the red priests, believed that the doom could be halted. "Inigos tells me you carry a new vision," Chayana said as they huddled before the prow. "I have felt tremors in the earth, but only small ones. Has the flame shown you the full scale?" Melisandre laid her hand over the ruby. "Not the scale, but the method. The fire beneath Valyria's feet is ancient, older than dragon or man. It grows hungry when unbalanced. It will drain the land until nothing remains." Kina's eyes, black as singed coal, flickered with concern. "Last time we performed the ritual, the earth obeyed. Surely another such would suffice." Melisandre shook her head, hair brushing her cheeks. "The ritual bought time, but it was a bandage on a wound. Now, I must dive deeper. We must journey to the 4 points of Valyria, where the old magic sluices through the pillars of the world. There will bind the fishers. Chayana frowned. The pillars of geese lie in the jungle's north. No priest of fire has traveled there in ages. The air is choked with sorrows. Nenderwalens. Then we shall bring fire to them, Melisandre replied. Bring flame and mercy in equal measure. She caught the lookout's eye, and the man nodded. Land was in sight. Ragged peaks of obsidian rock crowned the coastline, and down below the water boiled with heat. The crew readied themselves. The jungles of northern Valyria were alive in ways that startled the intruders. Vines glowed faintly in the twilight, leaves edged in ember. Strange beasts, mutated by magic and heat, moved through the undergrowth. Serpents with metallic scales, birds whose feathers seemed to smolder. Each step into that green hell felt like a crossing into the mind of the old magic itself. Melisandre and her companions wore masks of obsidian glass shaped to cover the nose and mouth, breathing through tubes that filtered the gloaming toxins. They carried the dragon braziers from the Hall of Whispers, refashioned into torches that burned with sustained flame when fed with oil lantern essence. Their path took them to the first pillar, a towering monolith of scorched stone, ringed with natural arches that siphoned wind like bellows. Here, the earth's heartbeat was loudest. Melisandre placed a hand upon the jagged surface, feeling warmth radiate up her arm, searing through robe and skin alike until it became part of her own blood. She knelt and set the brazier at the pillar's base. The sisters formed a circle, chanting in unison, an invocation to the Lord of Light and a plea to the old magic to accept their offering. Melisandre raised her hands, palms outward, and released a thread of power, thin as silk, bright as a star. Into the brazier. The flame within flared, hissing with surprise. With a roar like thunder, the pillar itself responded. Ribbons of molten rock wept from its seams, flowing into channels cut by ancient hands. The brazier's light danced along the liquid veins, binding them in runes of balanced fire. The ground trembled violently, birds shrieked overhead. Then, as if exhaling, the pillar calmed. The magma streams retreated, sealing themselves beneath the stone's crust. Melisandre rose, robes dusted with thermal ash. One bound, she said softly. 3 remain. The second pillar lay to the east, deep in the marshlands of Mirth. Here the air was thick with steam, and sulfur bubbled from hidden vents. Chayana balked at the stench, but Melisandre pressed on. They traveled by skiffs carved from ironwood, guided by riverfolk, who recoiled at the glow in the priestess's eyes, but stayed true to their coin. At the pillar's foot, centuries of swamp had built up to form a platform of shifting bog. Melisandre strode forward, singing an old fire hymn, and the ground hardened beneath her. She placed the brazier on a natural ledge where the gases pooled, and the flame roared to life, fed by poisonous vapors. She turned the brazier's ring, so that its 4 sides aligned with the cardinal markers carved into the rock. The sisters gathered native reeds, twisting them into cords that absorbed the mire's essence. Melisandre fed these cords into the brazier. The flame changed. Yellow melted into green, then pure white. It flared until it was a column of light, shooting into the swirling miasma above. The marsh gas ignited, but instead of an explosion, the air seemed to purify. A wave of warmth spread out, pushing back the clammy damp, leaving behind a bitter-sweet dryness. When the light dimmed, the marsh was still, but the pillar itself had grown. Black stone rose from the slough, solid and unbroken. Melisandre placed her palm on the new formation. 2 bound, she whispered. 2 to go. The third pillar was hardest to find. Legend said it lay beneath the shattered peaks of the Roiner Mountains, where no river dared wander. The trek was savage. Jagged cliffs that cut the canvas of the sky into ragged teeth, winds that bit like knives, snow that melted into acid rain. Only the sisters' knowledge of flame magic saved them, warding against frost and fire both. At last, they descended into a crater at the mountain's heart. A thin wisp of steam rose from a crevasse blasted into the granite floor. Here the pillar lay, transparent, like a column of pure ice, yet radiating heat. It glimmered in the stormlight, pulsing with an inner beat. Melisandre unwrapped her mask. "This flame must be offered in truth," she said. We must lay bare our own hearts. She turned to her sisters. I ask your trust. Chayana bowed. You have ours. Melisandre turned to the ice pillar. Raising her hands, she uttered an invocation, not to Raelor, but to the melding of light and dark, ice and flame. The air around them shimmered as heat lanced into frost. She pressed her palms to her own chest, centering her fear, the dread of failure, of watching Valyria, etc. She let all her fear flow from her, into the pillar, and in that moment she understood why the old magic demanded sacrifice. Only if one bears one's own truth can magic be balanced. The pillar absorbed the fire and the fear. Steam hissed, and the ice melted into a column of obsidian glass. The ground beneath shifted, flattening into a terrace that overlooked the crater. Kneeling, Melisandre traced runes of flame across the glass surface, binding the old and the new. A pulse ran out from the pillar, tremors in the mountain that answered back. She rose, shivering not from cold but from the intensity of what she had done. 3 bound, 1 left. The final pillar awaited at the heart of Valyria itself, beneath the smoking sea, near the ruined ruins of the old Valyrian freehold. It lay cold and dark, drowned by centuries of black tides. To reach it, Melisandre arranged transports of giant turtles, ancient as the sea, skin like steel, and dived with her sisters into the depths. They carried the last brazier in a watertight glass orb. Deep under the waves, currents tugged at them. Bioluminescent creatures drifted by like ghosts. And there, infinitely far below, the pillar awaited. A column of salt-encrusted stone, ribbed with coral and barnacle. Its surface glowed with veins of blue-green light, as if the earth's core bled up to meet the sea. Melisandre anchored herself to the pillar, with chains of fire-forged steel. She closed her eyes, inhaled brine, and whispered both the prayer of the Lord of Light and the secret chant of the old magic. She felt her life thread stretched taut, life she had given, hope she had stolen. She felt the voices of all she had lost. Her youth, her faith, her dreams of simple devotion. Then she poured herself into the brazier's flame. The orb of glass burned bright as the sea around her boiled. Magic crackled in her blood. Time slowed. She saw the doom that had loomed since her first vision. The crumbling of cities, the dying of dragons, the hush that follows great fire. But she also saw another vision. Valyria, rebuilt in mercy, dragons guided by compassion. People who understood that fire is both destroyer and giver. A cry tore from her lips, equal parts agony and triumph, and the orb shattered. Flame surged into the pillar, eating away coral, transforming salt into steam, welding stone and glass. The ocean above him roared as a geyser of steam blasted forth, carrying fragments of molten rock upward, until it pierced the sea's surface like a coming comet. Moments later, when the sea calmed, each pillar, east, north, south, and deep, shone with renewed light. Ribbons of balanced magic wove between them, a lattice that spanned the realm. The old magic had been bound. The Lord of Light had blessed it. The doom, deferred at the cost of sacrifice, was no longer inevitable. When Melisandre emerged onto the deck of her galley, she was spent. Her robes were torn, her skin blistered from arcane heat, her hair singed. She bore no triumphant smile, only tired relief. Kina helped her up the gangplank. Chayana offered a water scraper to cleanse her face. Nizri held her cloak. They returned to Valyria beneath a sky of ember and smoke. Over the city, dragons wheeled in circles of triumphant roar. In the streets, people wept with relief, fell to their knees in gratitude. Lord Aenar awaited them at the docks, staff in hand, face pale, but eyes alight. At first he said nothing. Then he stepped forward and lowered his voice. "You have done more than bind the doom," he whispered. "You have taught us humility. We shall remember." Melisandre bowed her head. She felt the weight of every choice she had made, every oath, every sacrifice. But under that weight lay something new. Possibility. The world still turned. The war between light and dark still raged. Yet Valyria, once the pinnacle of hubris, would stand as a testament to balance. In the days that followed, the Red Priests documented their rites, teaching flame lore to dragon riders and architects of the new city. They built a new temple, open to all faiths, where fire and stone coexisted in equal reverence. The dragons, taught to heed mercy as well as command, became guardians instead of weapons. And Melisandre, though aged beyond mortal measure, felt a spark rekindled in her breast. She walked the halls of the Golden Flame one evening, alone, candlelight flickering along obsidian walls. She knelt before an empty altar and whispered a prayer, not for sight of doom, but for wisdom to guide what must come next. The flame at her throat glowed. She rose and touched the black glass window, gazing toward the smoking sea. Beyond the horizon, new challenges stirred. Ancient enemies awakened. Rivals coveted Valyria's reborn glory. But Melisandre no longer feared the smoke and ash, for she had seen both paths. The one that led to ruin and the one lit by hope. And armed with that vision, she would walk whichever road lay ahead, guided by the flame in her hand and the one within her heart. Melisandre's return to the citadel was marked not by trumpets or celebration, but by a subdued hush of reverence. Though the city thrummed with renewed life, streets cleared of ash, fountains running pure water once more, its people carried an unspoken respect for the fire priestess who had braved depth and summit to bind the old magic itself. Servants parted as she passed. Dragon lords inclined their heads, and even the unsullied lowered their spears. Within the newly consecrated Temple of Four Flames, Melisandre found Einar awaiting her. The lord stood before an altar carved of obsidian and quartz, 4 braziers burning atop it, each flame a different hue: white for the smoking sea, green for the marshes, silver for the mountain, and red for the heart of Valyria. Incense curled in the air, and the hush was broken only by the soft patter of her footsteps. "My lady," Einar intoned, voice low with awe, "you have given us a gift we scarcely dared dream possible." Melisandre paused before the altar, fingers brushing the rim of the silver brazier. "The gift is fragile," she replied, echoing the weariness that lay behind her fierce calm. "Balance must be maintained." He turned, concern knitting his brow. "Will it hold?" She closed her eyes. Even now, echoes of the binding rituals still resonated in her mind. Ghostly tremors that spoke of powers too vast for mortal conceit. "For now," she said, "but only if you tend it. The old magic thirsts for reckoning. Should compassion wane, the doom will stir anew." "Bendo." He bowed his head, and then, in a quiet gesture, reached into his robes and withdrew a length of Valyrian steel, shimmering violet in the torchlight. "A gift for you. A blade tempered in our finest forges, its core inscribed with the runes you etched upon the pillars, so that you may bear our pledge as well as we." Melisandre accepted the blade with both hands, feeling its cool weight, almost alive under her fingers. "Thank you," she whispered. "May its edge remind us both of the price of true balance." For weeks afterward, Melisandre remained in Valyria, instructing priests and dragon riders alike in the lore she had reclaimed. She taught them that fire need not be weapon alone, but could be a shield, a beacon, a means of healing. In the city smithies, artisans learned to bind small runic seals into armor plates, kernels of flame magic that could harden steel against shock or burn through fetters. Dragons were trained to obey mercy as well as command. Riders practiced sparing maneuvers that would subdue raiders without razing the land. Yet school and sanctuary could not fill the restlessness in Melisandre's heart. Each night, after lessons ended and the city's lamps were tended, she would climb to the temple's highest parapet, blade at her side, and stare out across the smoking sea. There, beyond the horizon's rim, she sensed new stirrings, whispers of other realms untouched by Valyria's redemption. One such evening, as the sun sank behind ashen clouds, she felt a presence at her elbow. Nesrine, her youngest companion, watched the sea with wary eyes. "My lady, you seem troubled." She did not turn. The doom was only one of many tides. "There are threats to Valyria yet unknown." powers that lay dormant while men and dragons warred. Nesri straightened. Like the sorcerers of Sothorios or the necromancers of Norvus, Melisandre's lips curved faintly. Perhaps. But darker still are the currents that flow beneath the world. Ancient houses whose names have been lost, and the magic tied to them. We have bound one danger. Now we must guard against the rest. Damdan. Nesri hesitated, then nodded. What would you have us do? Melisandre sheathed the steel at her waist. We prepare. We learn. We watch the flames, not just those we kindle, but those that flicker in every hearth, every forge, every heart. Across the narrow sea, whispers of Valyria's resurrection spread. Merchants from Lys and Tyrosh arrived bearing letters sealed with unfamiliar sigils, offering trade, alliance, even marriage into ancient lines believed extinct. Among them came Lord Darren Saltigar of Claw Isle, whose family once ruled both sea and savannah with fleets of galleys and winged beasts. He arrived in Valyria's embrace as if stepping into legend, silver-haired, courtly, bearing news of shadows across the stepstones. Pirate bands united under a cruel captain who called himself the Black Drake. In council, Aenar laid out the threat. These pirates have turned to sorcery. They brandish wands of bone, call ice witches to their banners. They have taken pillaged Valyrian relics, seeking power through desecration. Dragon Lord Myra Targaryen rose. They will not stand against Vogr. Aenar shook his head. Dragonfire alone cannot cleanse such foulness. We need the priestess. His gaze turned to Melisandre. My lady, will you travel to these isles and confront this darkness? She considered the calm fury in her lord's eyes. I will, she said. Thus a small fleet was assembled. 3 galleys manned by dragon banners, escorted by dragon riders, and led by Melisandre and Nesri. Before departure, Melisandre stood at the shore as dawn broke silver across the sea. In her hand she held the Valyrian steel blade. At her throat the ruby glowed. She breathed in the salt and ash-laden air, and in that instant felt both the promise and the peril of the new age. The voyage to the Stepstones took a week of fair wind and haunted nights. Under a sky unbroken by stars, Melisandre sat at the prow, torch held low, watching phosphorescent fish swirl beneath the hull. It was on the 4th night that the sea gave its first sign of ill will. A low groan rose from the deep, like earth cracking in sleep, followed by the sudden swell of waves taller than a man. The helmsman cried out as the galley lurched. Sailors scrambled to lash down cargo and secure lines. From the darkness came a flash of unnatural light, green, flickering, as if the sea itself had caught fire. Nesri appeared beside Melisandre. The old magic, she gasped. It reaches even here. Melisandre closed her eyes, feeling the pull of currents not of water, but of sorcery bound in salt. She raised her hand, blade gleaming faintly. Prepare the wards, she commanded. We will ride this storm. Below decks, priests sprinkled ashvine smoke and carved warding runes into wood. Above, dragon riders lit lanterns of ember silk. When the wave broke upon them, they met it with fire and flame lotus oil, hurling both into the surge. The sea hissed as fire met water, and for a moment a breathing space opened. A bubble of calm in the storm's heart. In that pause, Melisandre felt a voice call her name from the depths. Seductive, ancient, promising power beyond reckoning if she but bent the flame to its purpose. She steadied herself against the prow's railing. Below that voice lay the promise of secret alliances, of dominion, both living and dead, of easy victory over the pirate sorcerers. And yet, in her mind's eye, she saw the ruined Valyria that would follow such temptation. Dragons turned to stone, priests bound in bone, the ruby at her throat cold as bloodless flesh. Her grip tightened on the blade. No, she whispered, voice drowned by wind. Never again. She raised the steel high, and its shard of moonlight split the storm's roar. The helmsman shouted, and the dragon riders roared in answer, each flame from their throats a promise of defiance. The wave crashed and broke against their resolve, but the fleet held true, riding out the tempest until dawn's pale glow banished the worst of it. When calm returned, they found themselves drifting at the edge of a labyrinth of jagged aisles. In the twilight haze, castle ruins loomed, towers clawing at the sky like skeletal fingers. Green fire burned in windows. And from the highest battlement flew a banner black as pitch, bearing the drake's sigil. A raven's skull perched atop a dragon's wing. Melisandre lashed herself to the deck, breath settling. Nesri knelt beside her. "We have entered the drake's den." She forced a smile. "Then we must be the flame in the darkness." With that, the fleet turned toward the first island, torches lit and trumpets sounding the call to war, not for conquest, but for deliverance. And in the hearts of every sailor, every dragon rider, every priestess, burned the resolve to face the shadows, to stand between Valyria's new dawn and the ancient night that still lingered beyond the flame. Thus the next chapter of Melisandre's journey began, one of storms and sorcery, of pirate kings and ancient pacts, and above all, of the unending struggle to master fire's gift and its curse within a world reborn. And the sea air clung to Melisandre's skin like a damp veil as the galleys slipped into the approach of Claw Isle. Dawn's light lay pale upon the water, illuminating the broken skeletons of ships that littered the jagged reef. Each vessel, half sunken, bore the scars of green fire and bone-thorned arrows. Derelict corpses slumped at their helms, draped in tattered black cloaks. In the distance, the crumbling keep of the Black Drake perched atop sheer cliffs, its ramparts bristling with twisted spires and grotesque effigies of dragons fused with raven skulls. Melisandre stood at the prow, steel blade strapped to her back, and watched the scene with that stillness born of hard-won resolve. Around her, the dragon riders gathered before mounting their beasts, the dragon's leathery wings creased with patience and authority. Below deck, the priests murmured prayers to R'hllor, each syllable a plea for lantern-bright clarity in the coming storm of sorcery. Nesri approached, her waxed torch trailing smoke that curled in the morning breeze. "They say the Drake commands a coven of ice witches," she murmured, voice low. "Their spells freeze iron in the forge, turn water into shards sharp enough to pierce armor. They feast on blood and bitterness." Melisandre nodded. "Then we must counter with fire born of mercy, not vengeance. We seek their undoing, not their slaughter." Below them, the decks shuddered as the flagship grated against hidden rocks. Einar's herald sounded the call, brass ringing with solemn clarity. On the island's rocky shore, a throng of pirates gathered, pale faces sunken with war-mad hunger, eyes gleaming with sorcerous malice. At their center stood the Black Drake himself, a tall figure draped in black scales, mask of polished bone concealing all but two glittering eyes. He held aloft a raven-feathered staff, its tip crowned with a dragon's fang stained green. At Melisandre's signal, dragon riders leapt into the saddle, and dragons roared their answer, flames licking the sky. Above the cacophony, the Drake let loose a curse shattering as glass. The coven of ice witches responded, weaving blasts of bitter wind that crystallized on impact. The first clash was thunder and lightning, dragonfire meeting freezing gusts as steel met ice. Melisandre moved to the gangplank, blade drawn, her steps light upon the wood. As she set foot on the stones, the coven unleashed a volley of ice shards, each a projectile of razor-cold intent. She lifted her staff, a simple rod of ashwood tipped with ruby, and traced a sigil in the air. The shards splintered mid-flight, collapsing into harmless vapor. She pressed onward, chanting a litany that blended red priest flame hymns with the ancient tongue of the old magic. Pirates surged forward, cutlasses glinting. Melisandre whirled, the steel blade singing in her hand. Each stroke was measured mercy. A disarmed arm, a freed captive, a binding of limbs in ropes of woven flame. Beside her, Nesri chanted, unleashing flashes of molten light that sank into the stones, sealing fissures in the earth and rooting the Drake's followers in place. The battle swirled around the keep's gate, flame lotus petals drifting like snow, dragons circling overhead, the shriek of cursed sorcery echoing against the cliffs. Yet amid it all, Melisandre saw the drake ascend the wall to a parapet high above. With slow deliberation, she climbed the keep's spiral stair. Each step a test of will against the coven's enchantments that sought to freeze her blood. At the summit, the wind screamed through battered crenellations. The drake stood before a great brazier of black iron, its fire guttering with unnatural green flame. Wrapped around its base were skeletal dragons, barbed chains that pulsed with every heartbeat. He regarded Melisandre with a tilt of his bone mask. "Priestess," he rasped, voice hollow as the crypts beneath the keep. "You have come far to die." She studied the brazier, saw the chains anchored in its coals, and recognized the horrid truth. The coven was drawing power from the old magic bound beneath Valyria itself, twisting it into a weapon of perpetual winter. If left unchecked, the entire region would succumb to an eternal frost. Glaciers creeping into the narrow sea, dragons frozen in mid-flight. "I have come to end this," Melisandre replied, raising her blade so that its steel caught the morning light. "Your winter ends here." He laughed, a sound like bones grinding. He planted his staff in the brazier, and the green flame expanded, coalescing into a living wall of ice that barred her path. The air crackled as shards formed, thin mirrors edged in frost. Melisandre closed her eyes, centering herself in the dual heart of fire and mercy. She whispered the binding prayer she had first uttered beneath the smoking sea, calling the currents of balanced magic back to their lattice. The ruby at her throat glowed fiercely, and the blade at her side hummed with lethal promise. She struck the air before her, and a column of pure flame erupted, colliding with the ice wall. The two elements intertwined, steam hissing as they fought. In that clash, the chains around the brazier snapped, releasing a tempest of power that rent the brazier apart. Icicles shattered, green fire sputtered and died, and the coven's spell unspooled like thread. The drake recoiled, mask cracking, bone shards falling away to reveal a face hollowed by hubris. Melisandre advanced, the blade at her back now in her hand, tip glowing red with held flame. "Yield your darkness," she said quietly, "or be consumed by it." He raised bloodied hands in surrender. As she bound him in ropes of simmering light, he crumpled to his knees, broken. The storm ended. Below, the dragon's roars reverberated off the cliffs, a triumphant hymn to the dawn. On the shore, survivors of the coven and the pirates knelt, faces lifted to the sky, ash and tears mingling. Melisandre sheathed her blade, its edge still warm. She turned to the bound drake, now trembling, and offered him a goblet of water. "Drink," she said. "Let mercy heal what poison sapped." He drank, and his mask slipped free. In the clarity of his first unmasked gaze, she saw not a monster, but a man driven mad by fear. She clasped his shoulder. "Learn what fire grants, and what it demands." When they returned to Valyria, their galleys laden with relics of thawed lands and stunned survivors, the city welcomed them as heroes. The unsung, the dragon riders, the priests, the sailors, were celebrated in song and feast. Yet Melisandre slipped away before the revelry reached its height, returning to the Temple of Four Flames. There, she knelt at the altar, sword laid flat before her, hands pressed to obsidian. She whispered a prayer of gratitude and a vow of vigilance. 4 braziers still burned, each holding a fragment of the world's tremor. Ice and swamp, mountain and sea. She gazed upon them and saw the threads that bound distant lands to Valyria's fate. In the silence that followed, she felt another pulse, a whisper of a new threat emerging across the shivering sea, where the children of the forest stirred beneath winter-blighted branches. And so, though her body ached, and her spirit trembled with weariness, she rose, steel at her side and flame in her heart. For Melisandre had learned that prophecy is not a chain but a compass. It points to danger, but hands the choices to those who would follow its guidance. And driven by that revelation, she would continue to walk the narrow path between light and dark, forging new bonds of fire and mercy in every corner of the world, and writing, with every step, the next lines in the ever-unfolding tapestry of fate. Okay. A. 1G. Melisandre felt the weight of every oath she had uttered as she stepped from the Temple of Four Flames into the quiet hush of Pradon Valyria. The fourth brazier's red glow still pulsed against the obsidian walls behind her, a living heartbeat binding sea, marsh, mountain, and depths. Before her lay the winding streets, now scrubbed clean of ash and terror, and beyond them, the smoking sea, horizon heavy with storm clouds. Somewhere out there, in the frozen wastes beyond the shivering sea, another threat stirred. Half-remembered whispers of ice-born giants and children of the forest, awakened by long-lost magics. She wrapped her cloak tighter, leaning into the breeze that carried the salt of distant tides. Her blade, gift of Valyrian steel, hung at her hip, its edge both promise and warning. Valyria's rebirth had been hard-won, but she knew the world beyond its borders would test every lesson she had taught. Still, she did not hesitate. By midnight that same eve, a small flotilla of swift ships, each bearing a single azure lantern at masthead, cut through the narrow strait between Valyria proper and the smoke-blasted isles to the east. On board, Melisandre rode with 3 dragon riders. Myra Targaryen on her black drake Mirag, Corbin Celtigar on his silver-winged wire, and Captain Isahorn of Lys on her pale gold Aelip. Each dragon's wings thumped like distant drums in the night air, and each rider carried a brazier of balanced fire, prepared to face the unimaginable. Their destination: the island of Fornholmer, a lonely rock crowned with castle ruins, long whispered to be the slumbering watch of the old ways. Legends claimed that there, in caverns beneath frozen stone, lay the bones of giants and the graves of forest children, keepers of a magic older even than Valyria's oldest lore. When the sea around the island froze solid under unnatural winter's grip, the Valyrian council knew the source must lie there. Melisandre alone had the skill, and the vision, to unravel it. They landed in silence on cracked, ice-encrusted shore. Fur-clad sailors and priests formed protective rings as the dragon riders dismounted, brazier in hand. Aelith's breath steamed in the moonlight. Mirag's violet eyes reflected the lantern glow. Wire pawed at the ice. Melisandre led them through a narrow defile where wind howled like sorrowful spirits. At last they reached the collapsed gate of the old fortress. Within, arches of cracked stone soared overhead, and frost dripped from moss-green banners half preserved by cold. Here, the old magic lingered strong. Ice-coated runes carved into walls, frozen pools that shimmered with hidden movement, the faint echo of far-off chanting. Melisandre knelt before a carved face of basalt, a giant's mask with hollow eyes, and set down her brazier. The other 3 followed suit, each placing their flame-tipped vessel on one of the ancient plinths that ringed a frozen dais. They began the rite of 4 flames, a careful invocation meant to balance fire's warmth with ice's stillness, to remind the old magic that it served life, not death. Each chilly red hymn she taught them was paired with an elder word of frost tongue, a lingua ignota that none but forest children once spoke. As the pyres blazed, ice cracked and groaned, and from the vaulted darkness came a slow, grinding rumble. A swirl of snow burst forth as ghostly forms consolidated. A host of specters, tall as trees yet slender as reeds, their faces half hidden behind masks of bark and bone. Their eyes glowed pale green. They moved without sound, circling the brazier's warmth with mournful grace. Melisandre rose, voice steady as a mountain stream, and spoke the words of peace. By flame and frost we stand allied, by mercy tempered, fire reborn. We seek not to undo the old ways, but to teach them harmony. Nemshao. The specters paused, heads inclining as though considering her plea. A hush fell so profound that breathing sounded like thunder. Then, as if answering some ancient covenant, they gestured toward a hidden stair carved into the floor. Ice cracked away, revealing a spiraling descent into darkness. Melisandre exchanged a glance with her companions. "Come," she said. "The heart of the storm awaits." They pressed torches to the walls and followed the staircase downward. The air grew colder still, and the walls dripped with icicle stalactites. At the bottom, They entered a vast cavern whose ceiling was lost in shadow, and whose floor was scored by deep grooves, giant finger marks left by something immense. In the center stood a titanic sarcophagus of black granite, its lid carved with figures of both man and giant, bound in chains of fire-forged steel. Here, the old magic source lay bare, the bones of a primordial titan, neither man nor child of the forest, but the progenitor of both. Its chest cavity yawned open, emptied centuries ago, and etched upon every surface were runes intended both to imprison and to honor. Melisandre approached, raising her blade in salute. "Ancestor," she intoned, "we come to restore the bond." She placed her palm upon the sarcophagus, drawing the warmth of her inner flame, and let it flow into the ancient steel chains. The runes glowed, and a low moan shook the cavern as steam hissed from cracks, thawing age-frozen joints. The specters watched in silence. Then, from the dark reaches beyond torchlight, a single low breath echoed, like the inhale of the world itself waking from a nightmare. Steel chains melted into molten runes that ran down into the stone floor, weaving a seal that pulsed with balanced magic. The Titan's sarcophagus shivered, and for a heartbeat Melisandre thought she saw a glimmer of life, an ember of recognition in empty sockets. Then the granite stilled, runes bright as starlight, the chains gone, the seal complete. In the sudden calm, the specters knelt, long robes of frost swirling, and bowed their masked faces toward Melisandre. Slow footsteps echoed behind her. She turned to see each dragon rider offering a handful of ember lotus petals, tokens of human fire to be laid at the Titan's feet. The three sisters placed theirs as well, weaving a wreath of living flame and frozen bloom. Melisandre felt her heart tighten. She had done the impossible. Bound sea, marsh, mountain, depths, and now, the soul of the world's ancient sentinel, the power of ruin had been redirected to sustain. By torchlight, they ascended the staircase again, specters guiding them to the surface. Outside, the wind had stilled, and the sea lay open in silent tribute. Dragons roared overhead, and Valyria's lanterns shone bright on the far horizon. On the ship's deck, Myra laid a hand on Melisandre's shoulder. "You have given us life beyond fire alone," she said softly. Melisandre closed her eyes, tasting salt on her lips, and let the wind carry her vow. May that life endure, even when flames grow dim. And in the hush that followed, as they set sail for home, she knew the truth of prophecy. That destiny is not a path laid out in stone, but a living tapestry woven by each act of courage, each sacrifice, each moment of mercy. The world's fate, once destined for doom, now glimmered with hope, so long as there remained those brave enough to keep the flame alive. Now, Melisandre's triumphant return to Valyria was met not with fanfare, but with a solemn procession of those she had saved. Dragon riders whose beasts bore fresh scars of battle, priests with smudged faces and lanterns, still glowing from endless vigil, refugees from the stepstones sheltered by Valyrian mercy. They choked back tears and bowed their heads as she passed, their gratitude palpable in every faltering step. Yet Melisandre, weary beyond measure, scarcely noticed these outward signs. Her mind raced ahead to the tasks yet undone, the fragile lattice of balance she had woven across sea, marsh, mountain, depths, and now the ancient watchers of frost. That night, beneath a sky clogged with drifting ash, she stood again at the Temple of Four Flames. The altars blazed with their four sacred fires, crimson, jade, silver white, and deep ruby. Each hearth tended by a priest whose weary hands bore testimony to uncounted hours of vigil. Aenar Targaryen, draped in a mantle of violet velvet, waited beside her, his brow etched with concern. "You have done wonders, priestess," he murmured. "Yet I see in your eyes the weight you carry." Melisandre inclined her head. "Balance is not a gift but a debt, my lord. For every tether we bind, another strain emerges elsewhere. The world is vast, its needs many. Our deepest work lies still ahead." Aenar laid a hand on her shoulder. "Rest tonight. Tomorrow we can counsel with the council. She offered a wan smile. Rest is for those who believe their work complete. But you are wise to call for counsel. Nay. By dawn the next day, dragon banners fluttered above the citadel's towers, as lords and ladies gathered in the great hall. The chamber's vaulted ceiling, inlaid with ebony and bronze, echoed with the murmur of silk-clad courtiers and steel-armored commanders. Dragonstone's envoy, bearing gifts of seashell armor and whalebone spears, stood opposite the merchant lords of Myre and Lys, each eager to renew trade under Valyria's new mantle of mercy. Einar sat at the head of a long obsidian table, Melisandre at his right hand, her Valyrian steel blade resting across her lap. At her left, Inigos and the three priestesses, Kaina, Shayana, and Nesri, formed a silent ring of support. The hush fell as Einar rose to speak. My lords, my ladies, we have faced the doom and quelled the pirate's frost. We have bound the old magic and fire service and awakened the guardian of ice. Yet our world remains fractured. Beyond the smoking sea, the shivering sea, the deserts and jungles beyond, other realms stew in unrest. To ensure lasting balance, we must extend the covenant of four flames across the narrow sea and into Essos beyond. A murmur ran through the assembly. Lord Darren Celtigar cleared his throat. Might we speak plainly, my lord? You bid us march into lands we do not know, governed by customs we have never seen. To call down our dragons upon foreign soil. Mercy may not protect us from steel and spear. Melisandre stood, drawing the assembly's gaze with the quiet authority she had honed through centuries of prayer and sacrifice. Lord Celtigar speaks a truth. Foreign lands hold unknown dangers. But we do not seek conquest. We offer alliance. We bear the flames of renewal. If we demonstrate compassion and respect, if we share the secrets of balanced fire, we forge bonds stronger than any blade. From the back, Lady Alcovia of Tyrosh raised a jeweled hand. And what of those who spurn our offer? There are warlords who see Valyria's resurgence as a threat to their wealth and power. Melisandre's eyes flashed. Then we faced them as we faced the Drake. United, unwavering, guided by mercy and fire both. Let no lord believe he stands alone against the covenant we forge. Nender. Silence reclaimed the hall as Einar lowered his gaze. So be it. We shall send envoys to Qohor, Pentos and beyond. Let the message of the four flames spread. That afternoon, Melisandre and her fellow priestesses convened in the Hall of Whispers to shape the covenant of the four flames. Illuminated by lanterns burning with balanced fire lotus oil, they sketched out the tenets of their alliance. Offering of flame and forging of oaths. Each allied city would host a temple of four flames, where local priests and scholars would learn the rites of balanced fire and be bound by the pledge of mercy. Guardianship across borders. Dragon riders would serve as envoys and protectors, their dragons marking the covenant's banner as they traveled, their flame a beacon rather than a weapon. Mercy in war, dignity in peace. All parties would respect the sanctity of civilians. Sieges would be avoided where possible, and hostages treated with honor. Exchange of knowledge and tribute. Cities would share local lore, river magics, desert rites, forest songs, with the Red Priests, who in turn would bestow the secrets of the four flames. As they inscribed these articles upon scrolls of cured vellum, Nesri paused. These words are strong, but actions must follow swiftly, or doubt will creep in. Melisandre nodded, touching the ruby at her throat as if drawing strength from its hearth. We depart for Pentos in 3 days. Pack our offerings. Embers of balanced flame, seeds of flame lotus, the scrolls, and gather dragon riders willing to pledge their wings and hearts. Under a sky of bruised violet, a grand departure unfolded at the dragon gate. 15 dragons, their scales burnished and bright, waited in 2 long lines. Riders in crimson cloaks and burnished armor at their saddles. Among them stood Myra Targaryen, Corbin Celtigar, Issa Horn, and 3 new riders from the Stepstones. Former pirates now sworn to the covenant, their chains of frost melted into seals of flame. Melisandre rode Mirak's shoulder, cloak billowing like fire behind her. As the procession moved, she surveyed the gathered crowd. Scholars clutching scroll cases, priests bearing pyres of balanced flame, merchants loading caravans with gifts of Tarashi wine, Kuhori grain, and Pentoshi olive oil. Banners flew. Crimson dragon on black, silver phoenix on green, signifying unity. At the gate, Einar and the council offered final blessings. Inigos intoned a prayer. Smoke swirling in arabesques above. Einar clasped Melisandre's hand. "May the four flames guide your path." She bowed. "And may we kindle new hearts to mercy." With trumpets sounding and dragons roaring, they lifted into the sky, wing beats like thunder, carrying Valyria's hope across the narrow sea toward Pentos, the first true test of their covenant. The voyage was swift under the favoring winds, but omens accompanied their passage. Schools of silver fish swarmed around the hulls, a sign of abundance. Yet, at the horizon's edge, storm clouds boiled, black as dragon scales. Nesri, standing at the prow, shaded her eyes. Stormcrow portends trials ahead. Melisandre placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. All storms can be weathered if we stand united. Just as the first drops fell, a fast sail broke from the convoy's flank. A Pentoshi galley, its white sails charged with lightning sigils. They bore no arms, only flags bearing Pentos' 3 moons. As the Valyrian fleet approached, the Pentoshi envoy lowered their colors in salute, a sign of welcome, and steered to intercept. Captain Isahorn discharged a single flame lotus arrow into the sky, a greeting. The Pentoshi returned with a volley of golden flares, and the air shimmered with the promise of alliance. In that instant, Melisandre felt the fragile bridge of trust strengthen, flame binding new shores even as the storm threatened to tear the world asunder. And so, under rain and thunder, Valyria's Red Priestess prepared to step onto foreign soil, flame in her hand and mercy in her heart, ready to spread the covenant of the 4 flames, to face old hatreds with new compassion, and to continue weaving the tapestry of fate that might yet save the world from itself. The next chapters awaited. Political intrigue in Pentos's masked courts, the trials of shared magic among ancient guilds, the whispers of jealous rivals in Volantis and Norvos, and the ever-present shadow of dragons, creatures born of flame, tempered now by mercy. Melisandre knew the road ahead would be treacherous, the trials unending. But she had seen both doom and dawn, and armed with balanced fire, she would walk that road until the world understood that its greatest power lay not in dragonfire alone, but in the mercy that tamed it. And so, her journey continued. Chapter upon chapter, each word a spark in the dark, each act a step toward the promise of a world reborn in the light of the 4 flames. Melisandre felt the salt and thunder of the narrow sea, still clinging to her skin as the pentagonal harbor of Pentos came into view. Its ochre walls crowned by turquoise domes that gleamed under the gathering storm. Dragons circled above in protective loops, their wing beats stirring the waves into froth. Below, the city's great sluice gates had been opened to let the Valyrian flotilla in, and the narrow channel filled with sails of crimson, silver, and jade. As they glided toward the massive quay, Melisandre turned to the 3 priestesses at her side. Kaina, Shayana, and Nisri, each bearing scroll cases sealed with red wax. "Remember," she said quietly, "we are guests beneath the green towers. Our magic must be shared gently, our voices measured. The covenant of the 4 flames is new here. We bear both flame and mercy." Nesri smiled, though her eyes were grave. "I will temper our power with humility." Behind them, dragon riders readied the offerings. Brazier stands carved of Valyrian steel, bowls of ashvine smoke incense, seeds of flame lotus wrapped in silk. At Melisandre's nod, they began to lower their mounts to the cobblestones. Ropes slackened, saddles unlaced. The dragons sniffed the air, nostrils flaring at Pentos's heady scent of spice and seaweed. A sudden crack of thunder rumbled across the harbor, and rain splashed down in heavy sheets. The crowd on the quay, Pentoshi merchants, Kuhori guildsmen, Lyseni lords in jeweled turbans, pressed back to shelter, hoods raised, silks plastered to skin. At the harbor's head stood the Pentoshi Magister, Varzo Pal, tall and lean, cloak of emerald satin streaming in the wind. At his side were 3 masked representatives of the Council of Nine, their faces hidden behind horns of hammered silver. Magister Pal stepped forward on a raised dais, lifting one hand to still the whispering crowds. Even in the storm's fury his voice carried, "Priestess of the Flame, welcome to Pentos. Your arrival heralds new days for our city, and for Essos beyond. May your fire bring light, not destruction." Then Shawan. Melisandre inclined her head, blade sheathed, ruby gleaming at her throat. She waited until the storm's drumbeat slowed, then spoke. "Magister Pal, honored Council of Nine, citizens of Pentos, Valyria returns not with conquest, but with covenant. We bear the 4 sacred fires of balance. Sea, marsh, mountain, and depths. We offer knowledge of mercy to temper power, that all your cities may stand against doom together." And a hush fell as rain tapped the cobbles, punctuated only by the distant roar of dragons. The council's horns gleamed like watchful eyes. Then Paul gestured, and the first hooded figure advanced, unmasking to reveal the inscrutable gaze of Lady Farah Thoys, mistress of markets. She wore robes of storm blue, embroidered with goldfish. "Your words are bold, priestess," she said. "But here in Pentos, our people trust wealth and steel before prayers. Show us this mercy in action." They. At her signal, 2 soldiers stepped forward with a wheeled cart. Beneath a canopy of lacquered teak lay a broken merchant's vessel, a small cog shattered on the sea, its crew saved at great cost by Valyria's dragon riders. From the hold they produced crates of spoiled silks and salted fishing nets. The crowd gasped. These were goods the merchant could not sell, ruined in a storm that had capsized his ship. Melisandre approached, touching her palm to the crates, and whispering a word of red. Flames coursed through the wood, licking away rot and salt, healing torn silk as though time reversed itself. Within moments, the silks shone as new. Nets lay untwined. She lifted a bolt of cloth and let it drift to the merchant, tears in his eyes. "Mercy first," she said, voice clear above rain. "And then power." The traders murmured among themselves as the council watched. Lady Thoys's lips curved in a faint, reluctant smile. A small miracle, but enough to prove intent. She turned to her fellows. "Let the priestess of the flame and her riders present their covenant in the council hall. We will deliberate there." Then, inside the council hall, an octagonal chamber hung with tapestries of sea monsters and merchant ships. Melisandre laid out the tenets of the covenant of the 4 flames upon a long rosewood table. Each article was read aloud by a city scribe in common tongue and in the local Pentoshi dialect, while the council and magisters' advisors nodded or frowned in turn. As the final clause, all parties shall honor the sanctity of life, sparing non-combatants, and exchanging tribute of lore and resource in equal measure, was read. Lady Thoys leaned forward. "You ask for much of us, priestess, that we share our secrets to learn yours in return. Yet Pentos' strength lies in its guilds, whose knowledge is currency itself." Melisandre met her gaze. "Then let the guilds become your temple's partners. Let ironsmiths bind runic seals into their blades. Let weavers weave cords of flame lotus fiber into their tapestries. Let healers learn the pathways of mercy fire to mend what blade and sickness rend. In giving, you gain. In mercy, you protect." A murmur rose. Lady Thoys's hand hovered over the etched quill of office. "I will propose to my guilds that they study these rites, but only if Valyria places true faith in Pentos' institutions." From the shadows, one of the council nodded. Master Daros of shipping, whose heft suggested more years at sea than any here. He grunted. "We pledge port and harbor to your dragons, priestess, so long as they aid our trade without fear. And we will host a temple of the 4 flames in our chief warehouse district, under lock and key until properly tended by your priests and ours." Melisandre inclined her head. "It is well. Let our signatures bind this pact." Then, as quills scratched across parchment, the sky beyond the stained glass windows brightened with a shaft of sun, piercing the storm clouds. In that golden beam, the brazier's flame lotus incense smoke formed an arch of light, a silent blessing that rippled through every soul present. When the last seal was set, Magister Paul stood and addressed the crowd newly gathered in the hall's outer galleries. Today, Pentos pledges with Valyria to stand as guardians of balance. May no sword thirst for innocent blood, and may the flame of mercy burn eternal. The banners were unfurled, the green and gold of Pentos now quartered by the red dragon of Valyria. Outside, dragons roared in echo, and the cobblestones thrummed with new life. Even the merchants' faces, drawn and storm-sodden, broke into cautious hope. In the days that followed, Melisandre and her sisters taught the Pleasures Guild to bind runes of tempered fire into silks, so that gowns and tapestries glowed softly by candlelight. They guided blacksmiths in forging gate seals of Valyrian steel inscribed with mercy runic wards, and they instructed shipwrights in carving dragon spirit prowheads to guide vessels safely through storm-lashed seas. Dragon riders patrolled the harbor, their mounts' wings stirring trade winds that eased the passage of merchantmen. When disputes arose, between guilds over access to the new fire seals, or sailors over docking rights, Melisandre and Chayana mediated, speaking of balance and offering pyres of fire lotus smoke to calm tempers. In each session, she strove to show that flame, properly tended, could warm rather than scorch. Yet, not all were pleased. Whispers reached the Council of Nine that hidden cabals in Norvos and Volantis seethed at Pentos' alliance, that the Iron Bank of Bravos watched coldly, calculating cost and profit. Merchants from ET pressed envoys with rumors of assassination, attempts by shadow sorcerers who sought to snuff out the covenant before it spread. One evening, as Melisandre walked the ramparts above the harbor, Kaina joined her beneath a sky of lavender dusk. "My lady," she said, voice low, "I have felt tremors in the old magic. Echoes of rancor and fear. They grow stronger in regions beyond our reach. The covenant here is only—" Melisandre gazed out over the gleaming sea, lanterns flickering like distant stars. "You are right. Mercy is a lantern. It must be carried into darkness, else it shines only for those nearby. We will depart for Norvos at first light. Chayana and Nizri will go south to Volantis. I will lead the mission to the frozen reaches of the Shivering Sea thereafter." "Nawander," Kina nodded. "I will ready the ships and gather companions. The dragon riders of the Stepstones have sworn to follow wherever you lead. And we will need more," Melisandre mused. "Scholars versed in river magic, ice walkers from the Vale, and perhaps even a few of the children's descendants who still dwell in secret forests beyond the Rhoyne." Kina's eyes brightened. "Then let us begin." At dawn, the Pentoshi harbor was thronged with activity. New ships, 3 longships gifted by the Magister, their prows carved like leaping dragons, were readied alongside Red Priest galleys. From the Temple of the Four Flames, priests carried pyres of balanced fire, and from the city's libraries, scribes loaded scroll cases heavy with mixed lore. The council's banners fluttered alongside Valyria's dragon standard as Melisandre led the procession onto the deck of the flagship. Dragon riders strapped on cloaks of wolfhide for the cold to come, and stewards brought barrels of flame lotus wine for warmth and sustenance. A final horn sounded. Magister Paul and Lady Thoys stood on the quay, forearms raised in salute. "Go with our blessing," Paul called, "and may the Four Flames guide you." Melisandre inclined her head, ruby pulsing in sympathy with the harbor's beat. "We will return with new allies, and with the covenant stronger than ever." As the fleet cast off beneath a sky streaked with rose and gold, she felt the world shift beneath her, another chapter turning in the grand tapestry of fate. Ahead lay Norva's stony hills, Volantis' ancient walls, and the cold beyond the Shivering Sea. But she carried with her the steadfast conviction that fire, when wedded to mercy, could light the darkest path. And that, so long as one flame remained alive, hope would endure. And so, wing beat by wing beat, oar by oar, Melisandre's journey continued, ever onward toward lands unknown and challenges unimagined, bearing the promise of a world reborn in the balanced glow of the four flames.